And so I am now delighted to introduce Lissa Evans, who is joining us today to deliver a special introduction on why she loves library and why they are so important to her research and work. Lissa has written many books for children and adults, including Wed Wabbits, V for Victory, Old Baggage, and Their Finest Hour and a Half, which was made into a motion picture and well worth watching if you haven't seen it. So now I am just going to unspotlight myself. So just bear with me and put the spotlight on Lissa. And then, so over to you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. The first time I ever used the library specifically for research wasn't all that long ago. It was less than 20 years ago. I'm quite old now. And the novels I'd written up until then had been set within my own range of experience and my own lifetime. And therefore, libraries until then have been, for me, what they'd always been, which are my favourite places, basically. You know, my second home, my workplace, my palace of distraction, my leisure activity of choice. I've been a member of a lot of libraries over the years. In fact, one of the main characters in my first novel is campaigning to keep her local library open. It's a sad concept that I don't think I'd have believed possible when I was growing up. But then I decided to write a novel set in the British film industry during World War II. And there were plenty of books about aspects of this subject in the various libraries to which I belonged, including the London Library. But I had no idea at that point, having never done any research, how to access more detailed specialist information. And I set about it by the best possible method, that of asking a librarian, specifically the head librarian at the Imperial War Museum, who responded to my fabulously vague question, which I think was, I just wondered if you had anything about films, by digging out the Sidney Bernstein archive. And Sidney Bernstein had been head of the Ministry of Information Film Division during the Second World War. And at the end of the war, it appeared that somebody tipped the contents of his filing cabinets into 3 cardboard boxes. And I still think with huge pleasure of dipping into that first box and finding memos and script drafts and telegrams that hadn't been touched for 50 years, all on these small sheets of paper with tiny margins and pale type, you know, which illustrated wartime shortages far more graphically than any prose. And laid out for me in every letter the everyday concerns, the colloquialisms that are so vital to anyone trying to write historical fiction. And I discovered that the ephemera found in archives not only gives the detail, it also people's past worlds, and it humanises the driest of information. And I found my plot in the very first box, and I found one of my characters in there too. And Ask a Librarian was also my motto in the British Film Institute library, the Reuben Library, where I spent enormous amounts of time. And such was the patience and the endless good humour of the staff that I ended up deservedly crediting them in the acknowledgements to the book. And they dug out wonderful things for me. And this is another joy of archives and indeed any library, being told of some book or note or detail that a librarian has been longing to show someone for years. And it was in the BFI library that I read the original script of a wartime film called San Demetrio, London, about an abandoned ship. And the script writers obviously had a cast already in mind when they wrote it, because I found the tight stage direction. A very young man enters the cabin. He looks remarkably like Gordon Jackson. And I also found scribbled on the back of the page the continuity girl's handwritten note about how many days beard growth the cast needed to have as they floated in their lifeboat. And I might have been sitting in the studio in 1943 looking over the director's shoulder. But besides such specific joys, what I also came to realise over many years of research, because I ended up writing a series of books set in Second World War and also in the 1920s, I found that a specialist collection stops our knowledge from narrowing. It stops us relying on the distillation that a standard textbook or a frequently quoted article represents. A specialist archive or libraries is a jewel box rather than a single stone to get effusive. I mean, fine though the stone may be. And visiting such a library always feels like a treasure hunt. And before I hand over the stars of the evening, I just want to share one more memory really from that first dip into the cardboard box in the Imperial War Museum. Sidney Bernstein had been asked to give notes on the script of a film called Mrs. Miniver, a 1942 film shot in Hollywood but set in England over the first 2 years of the war. And his notes he gave were all about the authenticity or otherwise referrals to air raid sirens and night fighters and so forth. But what I found fascinating and perhaps particularly pertinent this evening was that he wasn't actually sure about all of the details. Were there night fighters in those days? He wrote, was there an air raid warning on the evening that war was declared? Would an ARP warden really have said that particular thing? Already, just a year on, or about a year and a half on from the events that the film was about, the details have begun to fade in his memory. And we forget so quickly, we end up generalising and merging those first impressions. And the specialist libraries and the archives, thank God, allow us to keep that past both fresh and detailed. So I hope you enjoy I'm looking forward to it tremendously. And I hope that if you haven't already got to know an archive or a specialist library, that this evening will act as a springboard for your first visit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lissa. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. That was brilliant. And yes, so I have now unspotlighted Lissa. And so our first talk tonight is with the St. Bride Library, who many of our followers will already know lots about, but I know we're being joined by lots of different people who may not know that much about it. So we have a video to share, and in it is starring our librarian Sophie Hawkey-Edwards and our library manager Bob Richardson and Mick Clayton, who is our print workshop manager. So please do just bear with me while I share my screen and find the video. So thank you so much to Bob, Sophie and Mick for taking the time to put this together, and we hope you enjoy it. So let me share that. So hopefully you can all, oh, sorry, I need to just enable the sharing. This is where the technical issues always crop in. Okay, sorry about this. Bear with me 2 seconds. Get it back up again. Where's it gone? There we go. Right, okay. So share screen, and I've got the video. Right. Now we should be able to have liftoff. Thank you for bearing with me.
Hello, library lovers, bewitching bibliophiles, intrepid investigators, rampant readers, and denizens delving into the world of words. I'm Sophie, and I'm the librarian here at the fabulous St. Bride Foundation. The Foundation is an independent cultural institute run by a small family of staff and volunteers that cares for an internationally renowned collection, encapsulating print, typography, design and papermaking, whilst working with the creative industries locally, nationally and internationally. Within the eccentric maze of our Victorian building, you can create original artworks on our treasury of historic printing presses, explore one of the largest collections of type specimens in the world, from the everyday digital typefaces you use on your computer to the big, bold, decorative lettering on billboards, or fire your synapses with our carefully curated programme of talks. We revel in revealing and interpreting the power of language, from the design of a single letter to the pulling of a printed page. St. Bride came into being in 1894, founded as a print school only an ink dabber's throw from the bustling clatter of Fleet Street, then known as the Street of Ink. At the time, Fleet Street was the centre of the newspaper and publishing trades, a frenetic, churning, sleepless beast feeding the public's insatiable appetite for news. Fleet Street and the many lanes and alleys that snaked off around it were full to bursting with the din and chatter of newspaper printing houses and the all-important alehouses that slaked the thirsts of the printers who fed the hungry presses. Amidst the dirt, noise and overcrowded daily subsistence, St. Bride came into being in 1894, set up as an educational and cultural institute to help the people of the parish. The institute provided access to a washhouse, laundry, gymnasium, free lending library, a variety of sporting and arts clubs, and one of London's earliest public swimming baths, surviving to this day beneath the floor of our Bridewell Theatre. Alongside these facilities, a purpose-built print school and technical library to train those going into the trade in neighbouring Fleet Street was set up. The St. Bride Archive provides a fascinating insight into the day-to-day activities of the Foundation, from the early brochures detailing the courses on offer and examples of the students' work, to the smorgasbord of cultural activities covering music, drama and the arts. the archive also tells a story of the social life and health aspects of the foundation, from the bathhouse and laundry to sporting clubs producing annual displays of gymnastics and swimming, to indoor cricket, running teams, and even some ping pong, in which sport to this day the men's single world champion is awarded the St. Bride vase. Meanwhile, our printing school, known fondly as the University of Fleet Street, continued training its apprentices for over 20 years, but alas fell victim to its own success, eventually outgrowing our august premises and leading in 1922 to its relocation across the river to become what we know today as the London College of Communication. So, while the print school moved on, the print collections of what was then known as a technical library remained. The library was a vital part of the original vision. The collection began with a private library of William Blades, a city printer with a passion for print history. His hoard of over 3,000 volumes included technical handbooks, manufacturers' catalogues, type founder specimens, and print ephemera. The library has continued to evolve, becoming the beating heart of St. Bride, a compendium of treasures that draws all of us in. And the great majority of our collections are housed in the Orwellian-sounding Room 19 at the top of our building. Not many people are allowed beyond its hallowed doors, but those that make it, through a series of ever more devious riddles and Herculean labours, are welcomed into the typographic equivalent of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. On the shelves you will find a quixotic treasure trove of books, pamphlets, broadsides and archives, home to one of the world's most significant collection of type specimens, numbering some 10,000 catalogued items. The library holds over 200 special collections, and every box holds some new wonder, some catalogued, some not, some objects easily identifiable and some, well, not so much. There are the archives of such legends of the print and design world as Beatrice Ward and Harry Carter, and folios showcasing the lesser known. There are histories of the great type foundries, plus the stories of the smaller ones. The library holds original woodblocks by Edmund Evans, known for his collaborations with illustrators such as Kate Greenaway, artwork for Edward Johnson's celebrated London Underground typography, and scale models for Margaret Calvert and Jock Kinnear's iconic UK road signage. Part library, part museum, we also hold many of the physical objects from the history of printing and type founding, including presses, punchers, matrices, and typecasting equipment. Visitors such as yourselves use our collections for inspiration, research, family history and source material. More than this, our library is a creative hub for kindred spirits, for our tribe to meet, share knowledge and let serendipity play its part in our work and practice. Last year, we celebrated the 125th anniversary of St. Bride Library, and to mark the occasion, we have commenced the next stage in the Foundation's journey, beginning our digitisation adventure, which will see us digitise our early type specimens alongside exhibitions, talks and workshops. So I will now hand over to Bob and Mick from our library and workshop for a brief sojourn into our collections, and if you're lucky, a spot of jazz flute.
These boxes, which one of our younger visitors described as looking like Ollivander's wand shop in the Harry Potter films, is actually a collection of steel punches from the Caslon type foundry. We have around 3.5 tons of steel in these boxes, 1,052 boxes, each of which represents a single size of a single typeface design. The punches were used to strike mats from which type was cast in the days before automated typesetting systems. In fact, some of the later punches were made for mechanical typecasting. What do we have? Well, this is a pretty good example of the sort of thing we have in terms of large display faces. This is a face called Italian. It dates from around 1821 and obviously comes from the Caslon type foundry. It's a very peculiar looking typeface on the printed page. All of the stresses are horizontal rather than vertical, which we are used to with Roman types. It was enormously popular with printers, especially those who were producing handbills, playbills, printed ephemera. It was never popular with people who had what they might consider to be good taste. The library also has an enormous collection of type specimens, printed specimens, one of the largest, possibly the largest in the world. And they include little gems like this from the Blake Garnet type foundry, later to become Stevenson Blake. And this particular specimen, which dates from 1819, is of interest because it contains the world's first sans serif type, known as 2 lines English Egyptian. Produced, our retired librarian James Mosley thinks, perhaps for a private client. It's unlike any other type that had appeared up to that point. Sans serifs had appeared extensively in inscriptional work, but not as a metal printing type. In fact, this is a later edition. The type was produced for the Caslon foundry, by the Caslon foundry, and first appears around 1816. We also have a substantial collection of wood type specimens. Now, I know that these are particularly popular in America, certainly because of the Hamilton Wood Type Museum. This is a little pamphlet produced by the English wood type manufacturer Day & Collins, who were just around the corner from us, not very far from here. It's a spectacular example of chromatic wood types in 2 or 3 colours. You may notice from some of these specimens, the bottom of this one, you can see the word bride. Now, bride is a recurring word in type specimens because the printing quarter here in the City of London was focused on St Bride's Church in the middle of Fleet Street. So bride is often used to show off the various wares that the type founders were producing. We have many wood type specimens from Bonnewell, Day & Collins, Joyce & Company, and of course Robert de Little, who was the last surviving wood type manufacturer in the UK. They were based in York. One of the most interesting typographical specimens is actually the decorated alphabets of Louis Pouchet. Pouchet was a Frenchman who came to England in the early 19th century and set up a type foundry in Holborn, not very far from here. Around 1825, Louis Pouchet started making these fantastic decorated types in wood. There were 30 or 40 designs, I'm not sure of the exact figure, but 23 of them have found their way here to St Bride. And when I say found their way here, I mean the patterns, because Pouchet used a process called dabbing to manufacture large quantities of metal type. They were created in the form of a boxwood pattern, same size. Each of these patterns, certainly in this design, which is the agricultural alphabet, would have taken an engraver the best part of a working day to produce. They are incredibly detailed. These were then used to produce a mold, and that was done by plunging this wood engraving into a shallow tray of type metal, which was molten. It sounds crude, it was very effective. If you left this wood pattern in the molten metal too long, it would scorch and be permanently damaged. If the metal was cooling too rapidly, you couldn't capture the detail. So there was a degree of skill involved in the production of the mold, from which metal types, like this one, were produced.
This is known as the Dürer press. It's based on an engraving by Albrecht Dürer in 1511. It's owned by the Dürer Press Group, and it's a reconstruction made by Alan May. We've had it since 2015, and it took just over 12 months to construct. The common press, which isn't used by anyone at this time, it's more of a museum piece now. It was working until quite recent times, but we've decided now that it's best not to use it because of the age of it and because of certain other things that make it difficult to use. Our 19th century presses that the students use when they're on our workshops for poster work. The Stanhope, that particular Stanhope is 1830, an Albion and an American design Columbian.
Hello again. I hope you enjoyed this whistle-stop tour of our unique collections. We hope you'll be inspired to visit us, and we look forward to welcoming you into our Victorian edifice to tour the building, research our collections, and take part in our talks and print workshops. More than that, we hope you'll be inspired to visit the many wonderful libraries of London. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much to Sophie, Bob and Mick for kicking off our evening tonight. And now I personally know a lot about the St Bride Library because I volunteer for them, but I still get so excited every time I hear more about them. And I'm even more excited and really looking forward to finding out about 6 more brilliant libraries and archives that I really should know more about. So next up, we are going to hear from Chris McCabe from the Natural Poetry Library, where he is librarian. So I'm just going to spotlight Chris, and thank you so much, and over to you. Oh, continue. Hang on, I've just got to, there we go. Got it. So I think, yep, we're all good now. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Chris, your screen isn't sharing anymore.
Okay, I'll just try that again. 1 second.
Don't worry.
Let me try that. How is that?
Yeah, good. We can see. Yeah, that's great.
That's great. Just bear with me a second. I get this to go. Brilliant. Thank you. That was great. Really enjoyed the St Bride's talk. So many gems in that collection. I can't wait to go and have a proper look, and really looking forward to everyone else's talk this evening. It's just a real dream for a librarian to have so many collections on show at once. So I'm going to jump straight into the National Poetry Library. You introduced us quite wonderfully as the Natural Poetry Library, Becky. I think I can assure everyone that we do wear clothes when we're at work. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the library. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history, and I'm going to tell you about the communities who engage with us. And I'm going to show some gems from the collection and tell a couple of stories. And I'm going to do all that in 10 minutes. So I'm going to be pretty quick. So the National Poetry Library is the largest public collection of modern poetry in the world. This is our doors. It's quite clear what we do with the big poetry typography there. It's a collection of about 250,000 items. Going back to 1912, so covers the whole history of modernism right the way through Dada, Beats, First, Second World War, through to contemporary poetry. The library was set up by the Arts Council in 1953, and it was opened by T.S. Eliot, and had a number of different homes around London until it came to South Bank Centre in 1988. And this is our home, our longest home. Just go back a bit, you can see just over on the left of the building, the highest windows there are the windows of the National Poetry Library. So we have this wonderful opportunity within this Grade 1 listed building as part of a multi-dimensional arts centre to reach people with our collections. And the library's free. Anyone can come in. You can join and borrow books, and you can just have a wander around and dip into the collections. What's changed a lot since 1953 is the idea of what poetry is. Certainly back then, it was very much a printed thing, almost exclusively for white men. But over that time, towards today, it's really hard to define exactly what poetry is, and that's one of the delights of running this collection. We have poetry objects, we have poetry without words, we have digital poetry. We ran an Instagram poetry exhibition a few years ago, and we lend out to people poetry through digital means, through our e-loans. So it's a really exciting time for poetry, where it's brushing up to the hinterlands of so many other different art forms. We have about 10,000 members, a lot more visits each year, around 50,000 visits a year in usual times. And I want to show you some of the people who come to use the library, different communities, often overlapping communities that we engage. Families and children is a real part of the beating heart of the library. This is our children's poetry den outside of the library. This is a pre-COVID picture. It looks like a world gone by. But here's the librarians dealing one of our rug rhymes sessions for the under fives, which we're going to start up again next month. So we're really excited to be welcoming back families and children into this space. And we have a large collection of children's poetry as well. people can take home with them. We also have school visits. We have a number of different activities for schools, and we're really out to excite people, young people, young minds with the possibilities of poetry. So really getting beyond the idea that it's something that is just on the page and something that always rhymes. It's really opening up ideas around visual poetry and typography and performance and nonsense. So children go away thinking poetry is something really fun and exciting, and something they want to come back and do again, or even better, pursue in their own time. We run right the way through to universities. We often co-organise symposiums and conferences, such as this Poetry and Race Symposium in 2016. But you don't have to have gone to university to come as a group. We welcome any adult groups who want to organise a visit, and we set up writing spaces or reading spaces in the foyer of the library so groups can meet. And this was a photo from our dementia friendly sessions in 2018, bringing together adults experiencing dementia to use poetry as a way of connecting with other people experiencing the same, and using poetry as a way of writing through the illness that they were experiencing. We reach out to language communities. We launched a project in 2017 called the Endangered Poetry Project, a call out globally to ask for people to send us the poems that they know in their own languages, responding to the fact that half the world's languages are set to fall silent by the end of the century. And we really wanted to understand what that means for poetry, and to create a repository for the future so we can hear these languages and see the scripts. And this is a shot from The Guardian covering the story when we launched it in 2017. And this project is still open, still runs, and there's an anthology called Poems from the Edge of Extinction, which gathers some of these poems together that we edited. It's a space for poetry enthusiasts, and that means you, particularly if you don't like poetry. Come and browse, come and explore, come and chat to the staff, fall in love with poetry, and I can guarantee there'll be something that speaks to you in the collection. We also reach out to poets, of course. This is the library transformed into a performance space, and the wonderful poet Keith Jarrett performing. We commission or contract about 90 poets a year to work with us and to do events or workshops or write a poem for us. And of course, we have the opportunity at South Bank Centre to really fill the spaces with poetry as much as we can. One of the nice things about the library, I think this will come through the other libraries, is the open access. The collections are open, so 95% of the material you can just come in and browse. You don't need to request in advance, which I think really makes these really lovely chance connections. I'm going to show you some of the gems from the collection, some of the things I particularly like. Just thinking about St. Bride's and typography, we have a large collection of concrete poetry. It's a real passion of mine. British concrete poetry, Bob Cobbing and Ian Hamilton Finlay, but also items from the international movement. And this is a work from the Brazilian concrete poet Augusto de Campos from 1967. It was made for the Brighton Festival. It's called Lingua Viagem. And really, it's a sculptural poem object, a really wonderful thing. As is this is a poster from a series called Gorilla. And it was produced in the middle of the race riots in America in 1967. Whole cities like Detroit and Chicago were seeing rioting activity for good reason from the Black communities, including the Black Panther movement. And this poster appeared really wonderfully using poetry as a form of activism. And you can see, in the text, arise, free yourselves, or arm yourselves, work to liberate the creative spirit in all men. Poetry is revolution. So this idea of poetry being a vehicle for social change, which is really an important strand in the collection. And this poster was made to stick up on the streets, to glue to the walls. And we were lucky enough to have a copy of this in the collection. I talked a bit about poetry brushing up to other art forms, at the hinterlands of other art forms. One example of that is poetry by musicians, people more famous in music than they are for being poets. But we have Patti Smith's first collections when she was a young poet in New York. Wit. I put the wrong title. The picture is Wit. We also have A Useless Death by Patti Smith, a really wonderful poet, you know, in her own right. And some of the poems became the songs that she went on to be famous for. And also Phil Lynott, when he was in Thin Lizzy, produced a very limited edition series of poems and lyrics called Songs for While I'm Away, in an edition of 1000. And we've got one of those in the collection as well. And I'm coming to the end of what I'm going to say. Just a few more things. I want to just show you the vinyl collection, because we have a large collection of poetry vinyl going back to the 60s. And for many years, we did not know what to do with this, because people were not asking for it. But poetry publishers began to release poetry again on vinyl, and we could see the appetite of the public, you know, to see these things. So we've recreated a part of the library where you can access the whole history of the vinyl collection as well as the new things. And I'm just going to finish with a couple of very short stories about life in the poetry library. One is a nice story about somebody called Jacqueline, who worked at the National Poetry Library in around 2000. She was friends with Alex Kapranos from Franz Ferdinand. And like many people, I bought the first Franz Ferdinand and listened to those lyrics. Jacqueline was 17, working on a desk when Ivor appeared above a spectacle. And this was about Jacqueline working at the National Poetry Library, and Ivor Cutler coming to the desk. I met Ivor Cutler on my first day in the library. He was a regular, and Jacqueline told Alex Kapranos, who wrote this song. And wonderfully, when we reopened last May, Jacqueline came back in and announced to the staff that she is Jacqueline from the song. And finally, I want to just tell you about my biggest challenge as a librarian ever, which was when David Byrne did Meltdown at South Bank Centre, the Meltdown Festival. He wanted to bring his personal library of books to the festival, and I was challenged with creating a library of his books in the Poetry Library and allowing his fans to borrow the books and bring those books back. So we created the David Byrne Library, put his books on display, created a membership card, allowed his fans to check out his books during the festival. And amazingly, we got all the books back minus one, which was largely because David Byrne said, I trust my fans to return my books to me, and they did that as he predicted they would. So that was quite a wonderful idea of what libraries can be in the modern world, I think. Thank you for listening. Back to you, Becky.
Thank you so much, Chris. I wish we had time to give everyone an hour to speak about their library or more. It's just so fascinating hearing about everyone. And I just know that as I get out and about a bit more with less coronavirus going around, exactly where I'm going to be visiting. So thank you so much. That was so interesting. I'm so sorry for my verbal typo of calling you a natural poetry museum. I was reading from my paper and not being able to see the right word very easily. So apologies for that. So I'm glad to know that you're all closed. Not that we have anything against that. So thank you very much, Chris. So I am now very delighted to be joined by Steve Marchant, who is the Learning Officer and Comic Art Curator from the Cartoon Museum. So I am just going to spotlight Steve, and then I will get your slides ready. So yes, I hope you're all enjoying this as much as I am. It's just been absolutely brilliant. So I can't wait to hear now about the Cartoon Museum. So can you all see the screen share okay? All good? I'm assuming.
All looks good to me, Becky, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I realised I was asking as, oh, sorry, I keep getting technical things coming up. So Steve can hear, I'm just going to mute myself and then hand over to Steve. So over to you.
Lovely, well thanks for that, and hello everyone. I'm Steve Marchant from the Cartoon Museum. No longer the comic curator, I should add. That's been absorbed by the main curator. But I am the learning officer, and I am involved in curating exhibitions still. We're just launching a Judge Dredd exhibition to celebrate his 45th birthday. But I'm just going to be talking to you today about the Cartoon Museum, and you will, in a fashion, see our library. I'll talk a bit about that, and also show you some of the things that we have on display. So thank you, Becky. That's our main gallery. We're located in Wells Street, which is very near Oxford Circus, and we're in a subterranean building that we moved to in 2019. This was purpose built for us. And what you can see here is the main gallery space with a selection of the original cartoon art that we have on display. What we display is original artwork. We don't just cut things out of books and stick them up. We beg, borrow, or steal the original art by famous cartoonists and by artists that slip through the cracks that we think are deserving of their time in the spotlight. In the centre there, you can actually see Roy Hattersley, the Labour politician from the 1980s, and that's his spitting image puppet, which we normally have on display, but at the moment he's gone on holiday for restoration. And but that is the main gallery as you first enter the museum. And if we can have the next slide, please. That's our library. Or rather, that's about a tenth of our library, which is currently inaccessible. In our old building, we had a designated room for that. When we moved to the new building, there were plans for us to have the library in someone else's premises, but that fell through. So currently, our library is inaccessible. We have some of it in our office, and a large amount of it is in a safe storage facility. So I'm afraid we're not able to access what we have, but what we do have, and which hopefully one day you will see, is lots of books about cartoonists, books of cartoon art, some of them going back well over 150 years, right up to the present day. So in lieu of that exciting library experience, I'd like to share with you some of the stuff that you'd find if you do choose to visit the Cartoon Museum. So next slide, please. Okay, so just earlier you saw the main space of the gallery, and around the side of that space are kind of separate corridors, allowing us to show even more work. In the main gallery, there's around about 250 pieces of original art going back 300 years, such as some of the prints you can see here from the earliest days of cartooning, from people like Gilray and Hogarth. And as you walk around the museum, so next slide, please, you will see we have like little kind of special nooks and crannies that we've crammed with artwork. But when this was specially designed for us, and at that time, because it's not exactly COVID safe, these nooks and crannies, nobody knew there was going to be a major pandemic when the architects designed the space in 2018. But in normal times and in not so normal times here, you see people are wearing masks there. Those spaces are accessible, allowing us to show even more examples of original cartoon art from that corner. That's the early 20th century, going up to the Second World War, an original art that was used in propaganda, in newspapers and on posters around Britain. So next slide, please. Yeah, that's an example of a print by James Gilray from 300 years ago. That particular print was showing the two sides of various prominent figures of the day, almost like a Jekyll and Hyde for each person. Who these people are or were is, well, they're credited down below, but really you need a degree in history to more perhaps fully appreciate them. But nevertheless, as cartoons of their own, they're well worth seeing. They're kind of easily understandable, and an astonishing piece of work from the earliest days of cartooning. Next slide, please. But yeah, it's not all old stuff. That's a more recent caricature of Tracy Emin by a woman called Nicola Jennings. And she does cartoons for The Guardian that are normally on the Today's Birthday column, where they give you the birthdays of various prominent people every day. Her cartoons are normally printed around about 4 or 5 centimetres high, but her actual originals are about 10 times that size. And so it's great for us to be able to show them as she would originally wished for you to see them. That's, to my mind, that's a splendid piece of work. So we have old stuff, we have right up to the kind of modern minute stuff. Next slide, please. Yeah, Posy Simmons has been a great friend of the Cartoon Museum for many years. She's often lent us artwork. She's come here to do talks about her life and her career and her artwork. That's kind of hilarious. And so, yeah, we try and cover as many bases of different types of cartoon as we can. Although the main focus is on British cartoons and comics, but we're not averse to stuff from other countries. It's just we would need a place 16 times as big to try and showcase the work of people the world over. So we do kind of deliberately keep things quite narrow. And yeah, the White Knight is Lewis Carroll's penis, according to Posey. Next slide, please. Yeah, these are visitors to our other gallery. So we've got the main gallery, and alongside we have another gallery that's around about half the size, 2/3 of the size. That's where we hold our temporary exhibitions. When we opened in this building in 2019, I had the jolly joy, as the then comic art curator, of putting on a major exhibition of over 100 pages of comic art from the last 150 years that we'd collected courtesy of a £100,000 national lottery grant. So basically for 5 years, if you bought a lottery ticket and you didn't win, I got your money, and I spent it on original comic art. So it was a pleasure and a privilege to launch the museum with this exhibition, and a small part of it is now on display in another part of the museum. But I'm hoping as the future dawns, we might be able to put some more of it on display like we did then. But yeah, that was great fun. Currently in that space is an exhibition called Laughter Lab. And well, it's an excellent way to spend lottery money. I agree. And yeah, Laughter Lab is there at the moment, which is a psychological experiment looking into the nature of humour in cartoons that visitors can come and participate in. It's been very popular. So yeah, come along, you might enjoy that. Next slide, please. Yeah, another visitor enjoying the comic art. You can see we've got the Beano there, and you know, comics. Yeah, there we go. That's an original Beano page, which you see it in real life, as with a lot of cartoon art, much bigger. The original art was than when it was printed at around about A4 size. So seeing the original art enables you to see all the details that were sometimes lost in the reduction in size and the fairly crude reproduction methods that were in use up to that time. And the Beano's still running. There is an exhibition currently at Somerset House celebrating the Beano, and not a chance to see it myself yet, but I've heard it's absolutely excellent. And I still read it myself. It's a very clever comic aimed at amusing adults as well as children, or perhaps I just have the mind of a child. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so it's not all just like funny kids cartoon stuff. This is a great page that we own from V for Vendetta, the international best-selling graphic novel about one man's campaign as a vigilante against a near future fascist government. And but the methods he uses are perhaps as questionable as those employed by those he's fighting against. Is he a freedom fighter or is he a terrorist? These are things that, although this was written and drawn in the 1980s, these are questions that we ask, you know, on a regular basis, given the events going on around us in the world today. But it's great to see the original artwork. It was originally meant to be presented in black and white. It originally appeared in black and white in a British comic magazine, although most people know it as a colour graphic novel because it was reprinted by DC Comics in America, although available everywhere in this country. But they needed it, or they wanted it to be in colour. Me personally, I prefer it in the stark black and white. The artist David Lloyd is a very good friend of mine. He prefers it in colour. So, you know, it's horses for courses, but you can see that original page on show here at the Cartoon Museum, along with so many other wonderful things. So next slide, please. We don't just have exhibitions. We, well, until everything went a bit chaotic a couple of years ago, we had regular life drawing classes. And in the evening for aspiring cartoon artists and artists of any caliber. And so we would hire a life model company who provided us with people that would dress up in kind of costumes and clothing inspired by items in our collection. And as you can see, people would use the opportunity to hone their cartoon skills. And I was in conversation with our director just earlier today about now things are hopefully easing, that we might be able to bring that back in some way in the near future. Next slide, please. That's actually our classroom, where in normal times I would be teaching up to 50 or 60 schools a year how to draw various types of cartoon and comic art. But it's also where we host seminars and lectures, such as this one was in late 2019, where academics studying the world of comics, as well as creators themselves, had a big one-day meeting discussing how to promote and preserve the best of British comic and cartoon art. So groups can hire the room for special talks. Till recently that frequently happened. So yeah, we try and offer as much as we can to the public. And if we have the next slide, please. Yeah, a big part of my work here last year was kind of, especially given that schools weren't visiting so much. We did a project called Westminster's Life Under Lockdown, where I worked with 6 youth and community groups and taught them how to draw their own basic, simple cartoons and comic strips, where they produced comic strips reflecting, it was called Life Under Lockdown. They did a comic strip each about their lives during the lockdowns of 2020 and 2021. That's the finished comic book on the left there. That's the front cover. We crowdfunded the money to get it printed and to pay to run the workshops, so they were all free to the participants. There are 2 great pages of the 40-odd brilliant ones inside. Some of them were quite poignant, such as these 2 here. Some of them were quite funny. A lot of them told us, I mean, it's a proper sociological document. I mean, you know, this will endure. And yeah, most of the time, a lot of kids seem to spend their time playing computer games or watching Netflix, but that's part of it. That is how children coped. So this is now that we've got an exhibition in the classroom of the original artwork. And just before Christmas, we printed up 500 copies of the comic that would be sent out not just to the youth groups that took part, but also to a lot of other youth groups in the borough of Westminster and to Westminster libraries. And we're hoping we've secured funding from the Foyle Foundation and others to continue this project in 2022 with some other groups, as it's been, rather popular and rather successful and great fun to do. And it's another example of how we're trying to reach out more to our local community and further afield. So that's pretty much, if we have just the next slide, please. That's us. That's me done. That's if you're on Wells Street, that's the entrance that you look for, next to a posh restaurant called Rovey. And as I said, we're underground. So you go in through the door there. There are some giant blow-up cartoons to give you an idea of what to expect when you go downstairs. So we're open from Tuesday through till Sunday. We're closed on Mondays. We're open from 5:30, from 10:30 in the morning till 5:30 at night. So that's me. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'm afraid I will have to jump off fairly soon, as I'm running the museum tonight and we close at 8 o'clock. And so I've got to boot out people and close the doors and empty the till, and then try and get out before the ghosts arrive. So thanks for listening.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Steve. Again, another absolutely fascinating insight into one of London's brilliant museums, libraries, archive. Thank you so much. If anyone does have a quick question for Steve before he heads off, then do stick them in the chat. But if not, we can always pass them on to Steve after the event. So thank you so much for joining us, Stephen. Catch you soon. Thank you very much. I agree. Definitely the best way to spend lottery money. I only buy a ticket very occasionally, but I'm very happy to think that my money has gone to buy some nice comics for the Cartoon Museum. So now we are heading over to something very different. We are going to be joined by Jessica Rowley, the library assistant from the Feminist Library. So I am just going to spotlight Jessica and hand over to you. Okay, thank you so much. Over to Jessica.
Hi, thank you, Steve. That was amazing. I'll definitely be visiting. So yes, I am the new library assistant for the Feminist Library, started in October. So I'm very new to the collection, but that's great because it means I can explore with fresh eyes. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. I'm just going to briefly go over an introduction and an overview of the Feminist Library and its history, the collections we have at the library, including the books, periodicals and zines, our archives, and also some items of interest. So where are we based? The Feminist Library, I don't know if you all know much about it, but because of funding issues and also the fact that it is mainly volunteer based, there's always been slightly nomadic in nature. So we recently moved from Westminster Bridge Road, which was a really small, kind of tucked away hidden building, to now in the middle of a suburban residential area in Peckham in a community centre. So it's been quite an extreme change in location, but I'll talk about why that's also been quite fantastic. So yes, as of 2019 and 20, the library has relocated to the Sojourner Truth Centre, and yeah, it was set up during the height of the second wave movement in 1975. So it was originally known as the Women's Research and Resources Centre, and it's had many homes, including above the Sister Right bookshop. People come to the library to learn, organise and form communities. We've never had a budget for books or consistent paid staff. My position, again, talking about lottery, was thankfully given to the library through the Heritage Lottery Fund. And it's allowing us to catalogue and preserve and conserve materials for about a year. So our collection strengths, we have a wide range of materials, mainly from the 1960s to 90s, mainly focused within Britain. We have some amazing radical and DIY publishing, items that are really rare and underrepresented in other collections, lots to do with the women's liberation movement, women's health, lesbian and queer life, and social lives of women. So the library is quite different to perhaps some of the other libraries talking today, in the fact that we are a collective. So we operate in a non-hierarchical structure. And in order to do so effectively, we have different working groups, of which volunteers are part of, as well as a few paid workers. So we have collections, which I'm part of. We also have the digital team, which runs the social media account and other online resources. The bookshop team, which opens every Saturday. We have the management collective, acquisitions, the culture team, curatorial, events, volunteer coordination, and admin coordination. But in a structure like this, everything does seem to overlap, and lots of people are different members of different teams. So I'm also part of the curatorial team, as I'm helping curate some events and exhibitions this year. So we have some great non-fiction books. So we have around 5,000 of these, and it's really strong in the areas of the arts, labour movements, activisms, and also the women's liberation movement. We also have fiction books too, around 2,500 works of fiction, and poetry. And our poetry collection is quite special in the sense that we don't focus on well-known poets. It's more sort of underground publishing and also DIY publications. The periodicals is the element of the library that I'm mainly focused on and also really interested in. So we have around 1,500 periodical titles, and they occupy about 85 meters of library shelving, something that we can't figure out who decided on that number. It seems to be plucked out, but we're guessing it's correct. And yes, it's a very sort of archaic process to look through these. At the moment, we just have a physical journals sheet, which is the volunteers and also the people who come in seem to love it. But when you work in the library, it's quite difficult to search through it. So that's my job at the moment, to try and digitize as much of this information as possible. And we have so many rare and underrepresented journals and periodicals. And yes, I'm here to catalogue and conserve. Zines, so we have so many zines in the library that I've never seen anywhere else. And we collect from a wide range of subjects because of the format being part of the strong feminist DIY tradition. Recently, we had an artist in residence from Sister Library, and some of her zines are at the top over there, which if you come in, you can have a look and purchase. And we also have an archive, which isn't located in the Sojourner Truth Centre, it's at the Bishopsgate Institute. They have temperature control and also have the issues of children coming in from the nursery and potentially putting their fingers on the materials, which does actually happen, unfortunately, quite a lot. But yeah, they do conserve and provide access to our materials regularly. And we also have an amazing collection of posters and ephemera held there. Another special thing about the library is actually our classification system. So this is also a feminist classification system. It's the Wendy Davis system. And it means that we can classify without any of the sort of patriarchal systems of knowledge or traditional forms of classification, such as the Dewey system. It's both positive and in some sense slightly more difficult, because as a user, it's positive, you can find subjects really easily, and also it's sort of a much more creative process in the library. But then when it comes to cataloguing, you have to ask some really quite difficult questions. But yeah, this is a living system, and seeing as feminism is constantly changing, and also we aim to be as inclusive and approachable as possible, we're constantly reviewing some of these classifications and class marks if we believe that they might be offensive. So these are some special items in the collection and some personal favorites of mine. So yeah, the Green and Common Peace Camp, we have some amazing items in the collection that you won't get anywhere else, such as the original banners and also some beautiful diaries and journal entries over here, and also some rare resources. So you have sort of pre-internet resources on women's work, such as the Women's Film List. And I think this is sort of what epitomizes why the Feminist Library is so special. It contains newsletters and pamphlets and periodicals that many libraries and institutions would overlook, just because it focuses more on like a domestic front when it comes to women's lives, especially in Britain. So the Reading Women's Centre newsletter is an example of material that we'll collect that a lot of other people would just discard or not know where to put it in a library space. These are some other newsletters, like the Brighton and Hove Women's Liberation newsletter and the Sheffield Women's newsletter, and the Yorkshire and Humberside low pay unit. We also have some broadsheets, so as you can see, it's quite varied. And popular serials, so Spare Rib, which has always been quite a controversial serial we have here. We have lots and lots of copies and editions of it. Every Woman as well, which I have been cataloguing and looking into, and Red Rag too. So I hope I haven't zoomed through this too quickly, but the library, it's hard to convey, but it's more than just a library. It's writing workshops, book launches, book clubs, exhibition spaces, and zine making. We've got an exhibition series in March coming up for Women's History Month, which is going to be all about textiles and tapestry and embroidery, as we're making new book covers for the shelves, zine making, socializing, and a bookable event space as part of a community centre too. So I think the move with the library has not only expanded how we deal with the collection, but also we're trying to become an important part of the community in Peckham too. So yeah, it's quite exciting, and these are quite new territories for us. So thank you for listening. And yeah, I hope I didn't go through that too quickly.
No, that was absolutely brilliant, Jessica. Thank you so much. Another amazing place that is top of my list to visit. Again, I think what I love about hearing about everyone is the amazing communities that surround themselves around these institutions, which I think are just as important as the collections themselves, because they bring them to life and things. So it's been so fascinating hearing more about the Feminist Library, and I cannot wait for the textile exhibition. That sounds amazing for Women's History Month, so I will definitely be visiting that, if not before. So thank you so much. I've seen a couple of questions, Jessica, in the chat. If you do have questions that you suddenly thought of for our earlier speakers, please do put them in there. You know, we're here for open discussions as well, so please do just put any thoughts in. So thank you so much, Jessica. That was absolutely fantastic. And now I am very happy to be introducing Katie Reddington, who is the Outreach Librarian at the BFI Reuben Library. So I am just going to spotlight Katie. So welcome, Katie, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Can everybody see that okay?
Perfect, yes.
Brilliant, thank you. So I just wanted to firstly say thank you to Lissa for, number one, mentioning our collection in her opening to this event tonight. The entire team just want to say hello to you, and it's been a while since we've seen you, so thank you for that. So I'm Katie Reddington, as Becky said. I want to say thank you again to Becky and to the St Bride Library for inviting us, because this has been so fascinating all evening. I've learned so much already about different collections, but yeah. I'm the Outreach Librarian at the BFI Library, Reuben Library, and I've only recently joined. I joined about 3 months ago, so I'm still sort of learning the collection as I go along, but as you can imagine, we've got so much to talk about tonight, so I'll get started. For anybody who's not really aware, I'll give a brief introduction to the British Film Institute itself. We're a cultural charity, and we're a national lottery distributor, and we're the UK's lead organisation for film and moving image. The BFI itself was founded on the 30th of September 1933, and as you can see, I've included an image of the BFI Certificate of Incorporation. The BFI Library itself was formed a year later in 1934 by Ernest Lindgren, who was to become a curator of the National Film Archive much later on. So we can say the library technically predates the National Film Archive, because that was founded in 1935. So technically we're the oldest collection at the BFI. As you can imagine, for a collection dating back to 1934, we've occupied a number of different sites across central London over the years. So we were in Shaftesbury Avenue in the mid-50s, as you can see, moving to Dean Street in the early 60s, Charing Cross Road in the late 70s, and Stephen Street in the late 80s, which in fact we still have a spot on Stephen Street, which is just off Tottenham Court Road, and that's where the BFI head office is currently. Which takes us to our current location at the heart of the BFI South Bank. So we're just neighbours to the National Poetry Library, which is really exciting. I'm definitely going to pop in, Chris. We moved in 2012, so we're just about to start celebrating our 10-year anniversary at the South Bank. So it's going to be a really exciting year for the library. But to just introduce exactly what we do, we're a reference-only library. But we're open to the general public Tuesday to Saturday, and our aim is to ensure the BFI library collection is accessible and open to everybody. We have no memberships, and we operate really a drop-in service to anybody who's interested in film and moving image. Most of our users are students, journalists, BFI members, obviously, scriptwriters, academics, and many varied members of the British film industry and the film industry at large. This is just an image, a selection of images to reflect what we actually hold in our collection. But we have one of the largest collections of written material on film, television and moving image in the world. And our collection is international in scope, with material in languages other than English. We have over 48,000 book titles. Examples of subjects include genre, film history by region, film theory, criticism, directors, actors, you name it, we've probably got it. We have over 5,000 journal titles, such as Sight and Sound and Screen International. We hold film festival catalogues like Cannes and Venice Film Festival. And within the library space itself, we also have resources and subscriptions to the Film and Literature Television Index and ProQuest. In terms of storage, the library collection is spread over 2 sites, with 55% of our collection actually housed at the BFI South Bank and the remaining 45% stored at the Multimedia Vault at the J. Paul Getty Conservation Centre in Berkhamsted, so not too far away. Usually, if any of those materials are requested in advance, it's about a 5-day turnaround to get them into the reading room. But the MMV, Multimedia Vault, is where a lot of our special collections are stored as well. I wanted to flag one of the jewels of our collection, which is our press cuttings archive, which was started in 1934 with teams physically cutting as many articles as possible that featured moving image news, articles and reviews. We actually disbanded this practice in 2010 due to basically everything being available online these days. But as you can imagine, this collection so vast in number, and because it's been going since 1934, it's had many different ways of being stored over the years. Started being stored in paper envelopes, we moved it to microfiche, and eventually now it's stored digitally, which was completed in the 1990s. And so the entire collection is now digitized, which means we've created over 4.1 million press cutting images that have been catalogued accessibly under film and TV titles or personalities such as actors, directors and writers. Due to copywriting issues, we're not able to provide that information online, but these are readily available in our reading room on the South Bank for you to peruse decades and decades of press cuttings. I also wanted to mention as well, although not although not part of the library collection itself, next door to us in the BFI South Bank, we have the Mediatek. And I just wanted to highlight to anybody who's not aware, the Mediatek is a free service that celebrates the treasures of the British film and television industry and highlights some of the treasures of our BFI archive. If you're not based in London, you can always log on to the BFI player to access these free films and free content. But the Mediatek itself is a really brilliant resource within the BFI for anybody who's interested and wants to actually watch film. I just wanted to give you a brief introduction to the catalogue as well. This is the homepage for our catalogue, which you can find online and obviously in the reading room as well. This really is sort of the gateway to discover information collected by the BFI since 1933. The catalogue holds over 800,000 film titles, including television programmes, documentaries, newsreels, as well as educational and training films, and it is really updated daily. BFI Collections is a record of film and television titles, as well as the physical materials the BFI holds on some of those titles. And of course, the database also holds all the information on the physical holdings of the library collection. And if that's not enough, aside from that as well, we offer an email inquiry and digital on-demand service to try and enable anybody who is not physically able to come down to London to request and obtain scans of book chapters and journals for our collections. So we're trying to sort of widen up our collection and how people can access us. We also we have run a series of events since 2005. These have been so varied, from book launches, panel discussions, Q&As, research presentations, script read-throughs and celebrations of film and media. One of our busiest events we ever had was in spring 2014 when we hosted a salon discussion that tied in with a season running at the BFI. It was called This Is Now Film and Video After Punk. You can see we hosted video artists, including Grayson Perry, George Barber, Holly Warburton, and Ken Hollings. You know, we try to attract as many varied people as possible, and we've always hopefully got something exciting going on. We've been used as a filming location for short films. We've been shot for TV inserts for shows as diverse as Mastermind to Dancing on Ice. And we've also played host to a BBC interview for Christopher Nolan. So we're definitely attracting people to our collection. As you can see as well, our next event and the first one of 2022 will be this Monday coming on the 24th, and we have an academic called Henry K. Miller who's going to be coming in to discuss his new book, The First True Hitchcock, which tells the story of Hitchcock's 1927 silent film The Lodger and how Hitchcock attempted to remake it in 1940s Hollywood. So the tickets are still available online if anybody's interested. I just want to take you through some highlights of the collection, really. This is our oldest book in the collection, and it dates back to 1646. So our collection obviously talks about cinema, but we do look after a lot of pre-cinema as well, which is incredibly interesting. This is the Ars Magna, which, when translated fully in English, is called The Great Art of Light and Shadow, and it's by Kircher. And the subject of this book is like the display of images on a screen using an apparatus similar to the magic lantern. And Kircher describes the construction of a catastrophic lamp that used reflection to project images on the wall of a darkened room. Although Kircher himself didn't actually invent the device, he throughout history made improvements over previous models and suggested methods by which exhibitors could use this device. Much of the significance of his work arises from Kircher's rational approach towards the demystification of projected images. And the Ars Magna was the first description published in Europe on the illumination and projection of images. Similarly, our earliest journal also dates back to pre-cinema, the Optical Magic Lantern Journal, which began in 1889 and was the earliest incarnation of what is now Screen International. So there's various anecdotes that a lot of my team have supplied me with leading up to this presentation tonight, but one of the funniest that I found was that Michael Caine once borrowed a couple of books from us and didn't return them, and we have his library card in the collection, and we still have the missing book card in it as well. And I was told by one of my colleagues at an event years later, a BFI staff member jokingly mentioned that we had evidence of his criminal past, and he was mortified, and he offered to pay the fine and the cost of the book, but of course we declined to take that. So I just thought that was a brilliant part of the collection that we have. I sort of want to end the presentation by highlighting some of the funnier and more eclectic parts of our collection. We've got so many interesting books. For example, my favourite being Cluck, which is the true story of chickens in cinema by John Stephen Fink. We have a book called Movie Stars in Bathtubs, which is essentially that, movie stars photographed in bathtubs. We have Hollywood Knits by Bill Gibb, which has the tagline, "Now you can knit 20 glamorous sweaters worn by the stars," including Judy Garland, Errol Flynn, Loretta Young. And last but not least, another favourite of mine is Audrey Hepburn in Hats, which is essentially what it says on the tin, Audrey Hepburn in Hats. So thanks for listening. I hope that's given a little bit of an insight into our collection and what we do. And thanks again for having us.
Thank you so much, Katie. That was brilliant. I'm still chuckling about the bathtubs and the chickens. That is absolutely brilliant. It just shows that there's something for everyone in every library or archive, and that things aren't just books. It's great to hear about moving image, vinyl, everything. So thank you so much. Again, another place I really can't wait to visit. I do love the BFI bar, and people are just saying that you can see Mark Commode usually wandering around and things. So
yeah,
it's great. I always used to go there and have be able to get a pint glass full of homemade sausage rolls that were warm, and they were the best. And I miss them, and I think they're back now, but have to go and they still are. But enough about sausage rolls. But thank you so much, Katie. That was absolutely brilliant. So thank you. And I'm now delighted to be handing over to Marion Jump, who is the archivist and library manager for the Marks Memorial Library. So please do bear with me while I just find Marion on the so I can spotlight her. Where are we? Sorry. Sorry, Marion, I can't see you at the moment, but is your video on?
Yes, it is now.
Oh, there you are. Perfect.
Searching for jump might work best.
Yes, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, welcome Marion, and handing over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, well, I'm Marianne Jump and I'm the archivist and library manager at the Marks Memorial Library. Firstly, thank you so much for the invitation. Really, really thrilled to be on this panel and to be speaking alongside all these other fascinating organisations. Particularly great to be on a panel organised by St Bride's, not only because you're just up the road from us, we're not too far from Fleet Street 2, just on Clerkenwell Green near Farringdon Station, but also because we do have an awful lot in common, actually, not least our archives on print workers and the print trade unions, which I'll be touching on during my presentation. So who are we? The Marks Memorial Library is a library, archive and education charity. And our aim is to spread knowledge and understanding on the science of Marxism and the history of the working class movement, both in this country and around the world. We were founded, like the BFI, I didn't know this, in 1933. It was 50 years since Karl Marx had died, and a Marx commemoration committee was set up. A group of communists, socialists and trade unionists got together to discuss how to commemorate the life of Karl Marx. And of course, in 1933, this was very much against the backdrop of the rise of fascism in Europe, and particularly the burning of the books in Nazi Germany. So a library was seen as a fitting memorial to the philosopher. So for almost 90 years now, we've been accumulating our collection of books, periodicals and pamphlets and archives on Marxism and socialist history in our lovely Grade 2 listed building pictured here. I'm going to mention a little bit about the history of the building, because it's kind of difficult to separate the history of our lovely building from our own history, because it's got such a fascinating radical story to tell in its own right. Our building was built in 1738, originally as a charity school. I'll skip over quite a few decades of history and get straight to the 1890s, when we were home to 20th Century Press, which was the printing press of the Social Democratic Federation. And it was on site that many socialist English language texts were printed for the first time and distributed around the country. During this period, in 1902 to 3, Lenin, while he was in exile in London, actually worked in the small office picture on the top of this slide. I don't think he had quite as many busts of himself there at the time, but that's how we remember him. So he worked there editing Iskra, the Spark, a newspaper, and that again was ferried back clandestinely into Russia. And you can visit our lovely building and Lenin's office and see our fresco, you can just see here as well. Either virtually or in person at the moment, and have a look at our website to find out more. So now on to the important stuff. What do we hold in our collections? As well as our library of books and pamphlets and periodicals, we have a number of special collections. Probably the most frequently accessed at the moment is our collection on the Spanish War, 1936 to 1939. We hold an enormous collection of archives on the British Aid Spain movement, so basically the movement that grew up in the UK in response to the Civil War, in solidarity with the Spanish Republic and in opposition to the fascist coup at the time. And probably the largest proportion of this collection documents the experiences of the 2,500 men and women who actually volunteered to go and fight fascism in the international brigades. And we've got a lovely example on this slide of one of our banners. This one was painted by Lawrence Bradshaw, the artist who was responsible for the Karl Marx's bust at Highgate Cemetery. But not just those who fought, we've also got lots of materials you'll see here about this broader Aid Spain movement, people who raised funds for medical aid, refugees, food for Spain, etc. We have an amazing poster collection, just two examples here, over 2,000 posters. The last few years we've digitized, I say the vast majority, but we keep accumulating more, but we've digitized many of them that are now searchable on our online catalogue. Particular strengths include the international solidarity movement. This one's an example from Chile, and the Soviet Union and the Russian Revolution. Another key collection is our John Desmond Bernal Peace Collection. It's a nice link with the Green Common reference earlier. Bernal was president of the World Peace Council. He's also a scientist and communist. The rest of his archives are actually at Cambridge University, but we have his library and archive on the kind of post-World War II peace and anti-nuclear movement, which is really a treasure trove. And we just finished cataloguing this just before the pandemic hit, so there's lots to kind of delve into there. We also have just completed a project joint with British Library and Sussex University on our John Williamson collection. John Williamson was a previous librarian at the Marks Memorial Library. He was actually deported from the US during the McCarthy era due to his political affiliations. He was a communist, and brought with him, we're very gratefully brought with him, an amazing collection of pamphlets with particular strengths in socialist feminism and the civil rights movement. Last but by no means least, I'm saving the best for last and the most significant here, our printers collection. Anne Field, one of our trustees who's got particular expertise in this area, is in the chat, by the way, so if there's any questions about this, I'm sure she can help. Our printers collection focuses really on worker struggle and print unions, and the nucleus of the collection came to us in 2009. From Unite the Union. We've added to that since with these examples of these banners, photographs, many of which have been digitised at the moment. And we've also got a cartoon element to this collection. Here's an example from Tony Hall. A couple of treasures which have nice anecdotes attached. This is Mark's cigar case. Like many libraries, we've also accumulated objects along the way. And this item, we had very little information on its provenance at all, apart from this lovely note from, I assume, a previous librarian, which explains that it belonged to Karl Marx and was then given to Engels. And we've also got a lovely little press cutting here, which describes how it was exhibited to raise funds for the library in the 30s. This is currently on its way to Berlin for exhibition next month, which is very exciting. And we have this bell too that was rang in 1899 at the Trades Union Congress when a motion was passed to which led to the formation of the Labour Party. This was actually rang, I think, again last year at the TUC at the presidential dinner, which was quite nice to have that kind of chiming through Labour movement history. So who visits us? Our reading room at the moment is open 2 days a week. We hope that will go up again as things ease in the coming months. And we have researchers by appointment at the moment, but we hope again we'll have more browsers in. We're an education charity, as I mentioned earlier, so we do lots of lectures and events, including international conferences, most recently in 2018 to mark Marx's 200th birthday. And we've also been we've actually tried a few family days and things like that, and this kind of community engagement is really what I want to do more of in future. Recently, obviously, we've been trying to do much more online, including our virtual tours, lots of online events, and creating more digital content, including online exhibitions and video content too. So we really welcome a wide range of researchers to our reading room and to our facilities, including students, school groups, trade unionists, activists, and researchers from around the world. We're also a membership library, although anyone can come in and have a look at our material, but we do ask members to support our work. Like the Feminist Library, we're a pretty tiny team and rely lots on our volunteers who do an amazing job working on the day-to-day administration of the library. So yeah, in summary, I think that's the end. That's enough from me. But just to say, I think there's no more appropriate time really to bring together a panel on London's libraries and really kind of hope that this is the easing of the pandemic. We'll see all these materials come out and people having much more opportunity to come and visit these wonderful places. I've got a nice little list on my notebook now of places to go in the coming months. So thank you so much for organising.
Thank you so much, Marion. That was absolutely fascinating. Again, just so many amazing things and treasures and things to be explored and found. It's just absolutely fantastic. And now we are on to our last speaker. So thank you so much for all staying and listening. It's brilliant. And thank you so much to Cecily for going last, and we're now actually heading over to a library that is more focused on the natural world and nature, amongst other things. So I'm really pleased to be handing over to Cecily Noel-Smith, who is the library graduate trainee at the Royal Botanical Gardens Kew Library and Archives. So I'm now just going to go over and spotlight Cecily, if you just bear with me, and I will then hand over to you. So thank you very much. Oh, I just need to remove a spotlight. Sorry about this. There we go. Brilliant. Thank you. Oh, you're still muted, Cecily. Don't worry. There we go.
Now I'm not muted.
Perfect.
Am I real?
Thank you.
Do I
I
exist?
can see your slides. Yeah, we're all good.
Good. Woohoo. So yes, hello, my name is Cecily. I'm the library graduate trainee at the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew Library and Archives. Thank you so much for inviting us to talk. It's been really lovely hearing about all these other libraries. I have the same feeling of there's all these places I have to go and all these things I have to see. It's nice to be reminded of how rich the world of libraries that we have in London is. So I'm talking about Royal Botanic Gardens Kew, which is a botanical research institute. The main site is in Kew Gardens in southwest London. It also has two other sites, Wakehurst, which is in Sussex and holds the Millennium Seed Bank, and the Kew Madagascar Conservation Centre, which is in Antananarivo, which works on biodiversity and food security. Kew Gardens is a big garden. You might be familiar. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's called Kew Gardens in the plural because there are actually originally two gardens which were attached to two royal estates. So you've got Richmond Gardens, which belonged to Queen Caroline, and then you also have the gardens at Kew, which her daughter-in-law, Princess Augusta, founded. They had a physic garden, an arboretum, and a botanical garden, and what we have now is a kind of built from that. If you can see them, it's a really significant chunk of land. In the 1840s, it passed into public hands and had its first official director, William Jackson Hooker, and started to become the Kew that we now know. Our main library is based in the herbarium, which is on the Kew Bridge side. Just go back, the riverside. The herbarium is the name of the building. It is also the name of the collection of plants kept in that building. So a herbarium is made up of scientifically collected plant specimens that botanists use to identify and differentiate botanical species. So just like St. Bride's, we have type specimens, but for us, a type specimen is the first scientifically collected specimen of an organism. We also have a fungarium, which is like a herbarium, but for fungi. Plant specimens, they're usually dried and mounted for preservation. You can see when you dry and mount them, you lose information, you lose color, you lose structure. So you can see in this one, which is Ilex obcordata, it's related to holly. It's from 1867, and you can see that you have the illustration to show what it's like when it's 3D. So when you're doing botanical research, when you're doing botanical collecting, you need to have written descriptions and illustrations. And that is how the herbarium has always had a library attached to it. One of the crucial kinds of books we have are floras, which are books that scientifically describe all of the plants that grow in a specific area of any size. So as you can see, we have the flora of West Tropical Africa. West Tropical Africa contains 15 countries, including Nigeria and Ghana. And then we also have a flora of East Grinstead, which is about 2 millimeters thick. We also have a lot of taxonomic literature. The first books that we had in our collection, which were 600 books bequeathed by the Reverend William Arnold Bromfield in 1852, were mostly taxonomical. That's also the year we started collecting illustrations. We had a gift of 200 illustrations of plants at Kew, and 2,000 illustrations of plants at Kew, and 1,000 illustrations by Indian artists. We still collect botanical illustrations. They're sometimes called plant portraits. they have the benefit over a photograph of being able to show information that's true about the plant generally, even if it's not true about this specific instance of the plant. So this illustration of a water lily, the Nymphea flava, it's by Matilda Smith. It's published in Curtis's Botanical Magazine in 1887. Kew's been involved in bringing out Curtis's for most of its existence. We still have the originals of all of the art. Curtis has used these beautiful images, not just to inform the public about new botanical discoveries, but also to encourage gardeners to maybe buy some exotic plants, and to kind of show off the work of these collectors who had these scientific interests, but also commercial interests and political interests. This combination of science and commerce and Britain's political global ambitions, whether it's like imperial colonial expansion or it's sort of soft power stuff, they've always been tied very closely together. We've historically been very involved in something called economic botany, which is the use of plants for economic purposes, like food crops, textiles and dyes, medicines, poisons, building materials. So we have lots of books related to economic botany, which is everything, and lots of books on useful plants. And the earliest form of books about useful plants, medical plants, are the herbals, which talk about where they grow, how you recognize them. We've got several hundred herbals in our pre-Linnaean collection. So there's the well-known English ones like Culpeper's or Gerard's herbal. We have our oldest printed book, which is a herbal. It's called the Ortus Sanitatis. It was printed in Germany in 1491. As you can see by comparing this illustration of a mandrake with the actual mandrake root, Mandragora officinarum, which is in our economic botany collection, sometimes the information in herbals is of dubious botanical value, but it does look really good. So here's some more herbals because they're great. This is from the Vienna Dioscorides, made in 512. We have two facsimile editions. The original Dioscorides is from 77 AD. It's about this doctor who traveled around, so it describes certain plants. It tells you how to find them, but the focus is medical rather than all botany ever. And you can see at the top, it's actually got the name of the plant in Greek, Physalis. That's the old name. We now call it Alcakengi officinarum. Lots of species names and genus names have been changed, which is another reason why we have to keep all of the books. Then this is the same plant, Hozuki. This is from the Honzozufu by Kan and Iwasaki. We were given a copy at Kew in 1886 by Tokutaro Ito and Yoshio Tanaka. The Honzozufu is like an illustrated Japanese version of a famous Ming era Chinese Materia Medica, a book about medicinal plants. You can see it's gorgeously illustrated. It was hand painted in the later volumes because that was cheaper than woodblock printing, which is just astonishing. Another thing about this is it's in Japanese. The library collects in any language. If it's relevant to work that is done at Kew, the library collects it. So I've been informed, about 500,000 items in the library, which according to a recent space audit, take up 7 kilometers of shelving. We also have extensive archives and very extensive illustrations collections, including our permanent exhibition in the Marianne North Gallery. We have books in the library on botany, books on botanists, books on the history of botany, the history of horticulture, the history of botanical gardens, climate change, biodiversity, endangered species, invasive species, geology, museology, paleoethnobotany, just thousands of scientific journals. We have branch libraries. We have an economic botany library, mycology library in the fungarium. We have a library especially for the Kew horticulture students, a library in the Arboretum. And of course, at Wakehurst, we have another library and the Millennium Seed Bank Library as well. But the main library is in the Herbarium building, or it's always been. We have a new wing, which has a reading room where people can access the collection. We aren't a lending library, but anyone is welcome to come in and access the collection, though you do have to book a week in advance at the moment for the obvious reason. And people can access the library, the archives, and the illustrations collections all together. They basically function now as quite sort of team. So what do people come to look at? People might be doing academic research, they might be researching family history that intersects with Kew's history, they might just be looking at things that they like. People often come to look at the inwards book, which is a log of all the plant material that was sent to Kew by different people, because you can trace the story of a plant, or you can trace the story of a person, or you can trace just these networks through the contents of that. Obviously, we have the only copies of lots of botanical books and journals in the UK, so people come to look at those, or they might just come to look for inspiration in the illustrations collection, which is just really good. Because of our current reduced days of service, not everyone who would like to see us can access our collections, and even before then, not everyone could. So we've been working to kind of widen access to our knowledge outside of the library. We're supporting our staff at Kew to make research open access through the library. So we're trying to help them to place their articles in peer-reviewed open access journals, or putting their research on our online research repository. We have a team of volunteers who are digitizing a lot of our older and out of copyright library holdings for the Biodiversity Heritage Library, which allows researchers to access information no matter where they're based, even if they don't have an institutional affiliation. So it's a really good way of getting information out there, though it does have to be out of copyright. We've had various projects digitizing our illustrations. This picture here, which is a betel palm by Marianne North, who is amazing, that was digitized for the National Art UK website. There's a whole Marianne North gallery in there, and they're really, really good. We're also putting some of our archive online. So currently we have the Joseph Hooker Correspondence Project, which is going on, which is digitizing and transcribing letters from Joseph Hooker. His handwriting is quite impenetrable, so they've actually had to use machine learning to read the handwriting so the volunteers can then decipher what he was writing. But the stuff they're doing is really, really cool. Yes, we are currently open to visitors Tuesday to Thursday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and people have to book a week in advance so that we can get stuff ready, because it's only really based in the reading room at the moment. But we would love to see you. If you'd like to come down to Kew, it's very nice. This is a picture of fungi because I didn't manage to get any in before.
Thank you so much, Cecily. That was absolutely fantastic. And I'm a huge fan of fungi too. So thank you for squeezing that in. Such incredible visuals of all the botanics and plants and things that you have in your collections. Absolutely amazing. We're just so honoured to have everyone here speak with us. It's been such a brilliant evening, and I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I have. And I know there's going to be lots of visitors to all these places as soon as things open up. When will this pandemic be over? So thank you all very, very much. So it's been brilliant. So yes, thank you again to you all for coming. And I would just like to say a huge thank you again to Cecily, Katie, Marion, Sophie, Mick, Bob, Chris, Stephen, Jessica for delivering absolutely fantastic talks. If we were in St. Bride in person, I know the hall would be full of rapturous applause after every talk and at the end as well for saying how brilliant you are. And just thank you so much to Lissa as well for giving her brilliant introduction, and to you all for coming. So thank you very much, and we hope you've had a really great evening. Do come and visit us again, come along to our talks, go and explore all these other brilliant institutions and what they've got on to offer as well. It's just been brilliant. Thank you all very, very much. And have a great evenings, and hopefully we'll see you again very, very soon, and hopefully in person, unless you're in Stockholm, and then we'll hopefully see you online via Zoom as soon as we can at our next event. So thank you very much and have brilliant evenings.